Welcome to the Manuscript Academy podcast,
brought to you by
a writer
and an agent
who both believe that education is key.
The beauty is the people you meet along the way,
and that community makes all the difference.
Here at the Manuscript Academy, you can learn the skills, make the connections, and have access to experts, all from home.
I'm Julie Kingsley.
And I'm Jessica Sinsheimer.
Put down your pens, pause your word counts, and enjoy.
Hi, everybody. We have a very special feature today. Our co-founder, Julie Kingsley, usually interviews authors with me. But today, she is the author, and she is here joined by her agent, Lane Heymont. Welcome both. We're so happy you're here.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, the tables have turned.
How are you feeling about this, Julie? Is it weirder to be the author?
I feel a lack of control, honestly, even though I know exactly what's going to happen.
Well, I have no idea what's going to happen.
Look out. But yeah, this is so exciting. So Julie, tell us a little bit about your book.
Well, my book is called The Space Between You and Me, and it's coming out on June 4th, and it's a YA. Yay. It is kind of a regional book. It's really based here in Maine. It's a story about what happens when a group of young people in a very rural down East Maine come together with their wants and needs, and then everything explodes.
I love that because it's so hard to answer the "what is your book about" question.
Well, I was thinking about it. I was thinking I was going to get in the muck with it. So, but I've thought a lot about this project. I'm like, what is it? I mean, it's a lot of different things, but in the end, it's just like a group of kids in a very remote place and a lot of blueberries and then some love and some everything else.
I was going to say, you didn't mention blueberries.
I know, a lot of blueberries.
And one plush strawberry. So tell me, how did the two of you meet?
So I had a really weird path to publication. It's been backwards and sideways and all over the place. I'd been querying, but for me, like I'd always gotten a lot more hits from Hollywood. For some reason, I went to Grub Street years and years ago, and I met some producers there, and I always had a lot of stuff going on there. It was like a before and after, like a chicken and the egg kind of situation for me. And with Lane, I remember you saved me. You saved me from a precarious situation where, you know, I didn't have any queries out in the world, I think. And we ended up chatting about this project, and you were giving me advice about book to film. And you're like, let me read the book. And you called me the next day and you said, I would like to represent this.
The next day? Did you stay up all night reading?
Yeah, I occasionally do that. And it was one of those books. It's something about blueberries. I don't know what it is about blueberries, but I said, oh, I love this book. It's about blueberries. That's the way I see it in my head.
Oh, that's so nice. Wait, so how did you know? Do you remember the reading experience other than the blueberries? Do you remember what made you think, yes, I see how this has film potential, book potential, all the things potential?
And actually,
Yes.
let me say before you, like, we're talking, this is 2020, 2019. Like, it has been a long time. So
Yes.
whatever you remember is fine.
I do remember it was that this whole world existed that I had no idea existed. I had no idea blueberries came from Maine. I had no idea people were out there picking blueberries, and it felt like a whole different world. And I thought it was the most amazing thing that there's this whole thing I didn't know about right next door. I mean, I know about cranberry bogs in Cape Cod, and I think they're the coolest thing. And my dream is to go swimming in one. So blueberry
With the
fields,
spider.
yeah. I mean, it's just amazing. I love the world.
That's fantastic. Wait, so you're in Boston, right, Lane?
Yes.
So this is the whole world you didn't know about. 5 hours north?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, actually, about 7. So from Portland, Maine, you could drive to New York City, or you could drive to the tip of Maine. It takes the same amount of time.
Oh.
So the Blueberry Barrens of Maine, it's such an interesting place. So we're talking like 45 minutes to an hour past Bar Harbor. So if you keep going up past Maine, down east, there are these amazing blueberry barrens. And there's also a great French culture. And this French Canadian culture is a huge part of the book. And there's farms and What happens every year is that people descend upon these rural Maine places, and you have a mix of, you have got the kids from Boston with their houses on the water. You have the local kids, who are just kind of like living their lives, but they're living a very rural existence. You have the migrant workers that are moving from strawberry season to blueberry season to apple season. So we have a huge population of migrants here in Maine, and that's portion of the story along with everything else. And then you have, a place so small that the teenagers just in theory come together from all their different points of view because there's just not a whole lot of kids. And so you have like this microcosm of almost an old fashioned kind of world where everyone helps each other, but everyone's wants and needs can totally muck up. And we do have two main characters. Oh, maybe I should read the back of the book. It might come up better that way. Okay, you guys, I'm going to read it. For Clem, summers are for Maine, for wandering the blueberry barrens, helping her grandmother on the farm, and stargazing with her parents. But her grandmother is gone. She hasn't talked to her mom in months, and her dad is pouring himself into the family business. All Clem wants to think about is her audition for a dance school that could get her into Juilliard. The last thing she needs is another distraction. Then she meets Rico. He's nothing like the boys back home in Los Angeles, or the ones in Maine either. He has secrets that rival her own, and as they get closer, she's forced to confront the hidden realities for the places she thought she knew. With their worlds threatening to tear them apart, can Clem and Rico bridge a space between them before the summer ends? Nice. So yeah, there's like a ton of themes in here, right? So you have like summer love, all these kids coming together, and then you have farming and what you'll do for your family, and the realities are not the same for all kids.
Yeah, well, she wants so badly to go into her dance program. Mm-hmm. It seems from the beginning of the book that financially that's going to be a huge stretch. She wants normal things for her life, and she's got this incredible talent and this incredible opportunity and so much going on at home too that she has to balance. So I think that's a really interesting, relatable way for us to get into this, even if we've never been to Maine and don't understand the blueberry economy. So tell us more. So you had film interest and a film team when you met Lane, right? So talk more about that.
Can we talk about that?
I think so. I mean,
I think we can talk about the idea of it. No, let's not mention names.
Yeah, because, the option clause and promotion, but we can talk about it in theory.
Okay, let's talk in code.
Yes.
Okay.
So, I mean, yeah, it came with film interest, which was super cool. And of course, I tried to parlay that into publishing. And it's so funny. The thing I remember most being worried about when submitting it was the title, The Space Between You and Me. I kept thinking, I hope people don't think this is sci-fi.
That's really funny.
Yeah, we ran into some issues with one of the main characters being a migrant, but, we were lucky to sell it to a place that totally got the project and wasn't afraid. It doesn't hurt that it's in Maine and they know all about blueberry barrens. The film, I think it's progressing well. There was a lot of exciting news we had before. And I think once it hit shelves, it's going to grow exponentially.
Yeah. Like anything, just if you're out there, the book to film world is thriving. But otherwise, the strike definitely put weird stopgaps on things. And so we're totally talking code here, you guys. But it's interesting when you have book to film before you have publishing, there's all kinds of kind of crazy things that kind of happen. And, we're talking with the migrant worker, Rico. He's the best character, I think, in the book, the purest of heart. I was so incredibly lucky that I got to work in partnership with Elizabeth Lopez. And she is a Hollywood person. She is just an expert on book to film. And the only reason that I felt that I could keep, writing about a migrant worker is because I had her background, I had her expertise. I mean, every single piece was combed over by her.
So it's almost like you got a sensitivity read while you were doing the book to film stuff.
Right. Yeah. And I would say too that when you have Hollywood involved before the book comes out, it's like they start putting things in that they want. And so it ends up being kind of a different game versus just writing a book and then selling a book and then having it move to film. So that's where I was when you read that overnight, Lane. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. Like I was just like oh, because I wasn't in the space. I think I was about to table the book when you came in for that, because I was like, I understand some of the controversies during that time. Clementine Fontaine, the main character, leans into my French-Canadian heritage. So being French-Canadian Maine is kind of a weird thing. The French came down from Canada to work in the mills. And, you know, they had all the issues of the Irish and the Catholics and the, you know, like just moving into other groups that have come to Maine and like anywhere else finds that kind of harassment and eyes on them. And so when you have that, which I mean, of course, I didn't deal with it all, just to be really clear, but my grandmother was hit if she spoke French in school. She absolutely never talked about being French. It was just a part of her heritage she really didn't talk about. And my father had this thing that he would say to my mother every once in a while, he'd be like, oh, you're so French. And I was like, oh, is that nice? Is that a nice thing to say? And then I went to France and I was like, what was he talking about? Being French is so cool. You know what I mean? But it's just really interesting. And then like you realize that the people that kind of went through this, kind of moving out the Franco culture and kind of pushing it away from the rest of us, that we lost something, one. And two, I think one of the things that Clem has, I think I have too, is you have these parents that are such pushers, like this push. And this idea of you will do anything to be better or to do for your family or to make it nice. It's a very interesting thing. And that's what I played with Clem's character.
She also has a lot of spunk to her, though. I was thinking about that this morning. She is a chaotic good character.
I'm hopping up and down because you referenced alignment, and I was just like, chaotic good. I was like, yes.
Yeah. You know, she lives in Los Angeles and she only comes back for summers and she feels like she doesn't belong anywhere.
Well, she's going through a lot. Okay, so her mom's in LA. Her dad's in Maine running this farm. She's going back and forth. She wants to go to dance school. She thinks she can't. And they're all just working very hard to hope that it is a really good blueberry season because so much depends on that. And I believe you said that after, how was it exactly? Her mom lost a baby and the next harvest was terrible. And it's almost as if we're looking at how nature works, which changes their life completely, is almost this magically interconnected thing that no one really has any control over. Can you say more about that?
Well, the book follows the seasons. So it starts with rhubarb season and it goes from strawberry to blueberry to apple season to lime season. So I felt like it was really interesting to play around with. In Maine, we feel the seasons so intrinsically and we follow them, and each one of them has kind of a different moods and feels to it. So that's kind of how I dealt with some of the pacing and the time. But I really love the idea of if you're so close to the land, then you can use the land to almost like mirror your own feelings and your own needs.
So it's setting as a character, land mirroring your character's feeling. So Lane, I know you have a bunch of book to film projects. Can you walk our listeners through how that usually works, how it was different in this case, and what a literary agent usually does to help with book to film?
So usually most agencies don't really submit to film stuff until the book publishes. We're different in that we submit to producers, studios when we're out on submission because they've told us that's what they want. Hollywood seems to run on FOMO, so they want to see it before everyone else. And in cases like Julie, sometimes the film rights sell before the book. I always cite World War Z because they bought the world rights to the film before they even sold the book. So there's a lot of negotiation that goes into it because you can either get a right to shop, which means they take the book and they're going to go shop it to some other producer or production company to hopefully pay for it and make it. Or you can get a straight option, which means this person is coming in to purchase it or option it and try to get it made themselves.
Okay, so you're saying most agents wait until the book is published, really?
Yeah. That's
why.
I don't know. I think they want reviews and I think they want it to be splashed out there. But I mean, all the producers and studios tell us they want to see it when it goes out.
Yeah, or announced.
Yeah, or announced. It's very annoying when I get something announced and we sold it on proposal. Because then everyone comes and says, this is so exciting. I want to read it. Send it over. I'm like, yeah, we got like 30 pages.
Yeah, so we actually announce when the book is ready so that when we get those inquiries, we can send things over. So there is a lot of delay, on the front end. But that also means that if anyone is suddenly interested, and I announced a book a couple of weeks ago, all these film people showed up. Now, granted, when you hear from Hollywood, you don't assume one person emailing you means they're definitely going to say yes. The odds are very small. They kind of seem to just like look at anything that's interesting, ask to read anything that's interesting. It did end up working out. We've got her a great film agent. Very happy about that. Yay. But it's one of those things where it's like, every time we get into a meeting with people in Hollywood, they're like, yeah, send it to us as soon as it's sold. So I don't understand. And I agree. Hollywood running on FOMO sounds exactly right.
And it's interesting because I've run into publishers who don't want to announce until it's done or it's ready. And I totally get that. And also, authors want to announce everything at the time it happens.
True.
And it's interesting that you mentioned film coming out and wanting to see at the announcement, because that's what happens a lot with us too, that people see the announcement come out, they say, are the rights available?
Exactly.
They say yes, then you never hear from them again, and that
Yeah.
that the rights check irks me, because it'll be like, oh, Steven Spielberg's agent, are the rights available? You're like, oh yeah, I can send it over. They're like, no, we're just checking. Okay, thanks.
There's so much also in Hollywood that seems to be the just in case. Like, I will ask just in case I want to see it and the rights are available. I will option this just in case I want to make it. Hollywood seems to have a lot of money for just in case.
Yes, absolutely. And I hate to say, I've sold an option that is just in case, or to keep it from someone else, or, just to collect and see what they can throw at the walls.
Yeah. And I wonder how much of that is like, I hate, let's call him Joe. We'll just say Joe is a colleague in the next office over. Hate Joe competing, Hollywood company. I'm going to buy it so Joe can't. I wonder how much of that happens too.
A lot, I think. A lot. And, I've tried to use that to our advantage. There were 2 production studios that both wanted a project, and they had just been involved in a lawsuit. So when one offered, I told them, I was like, oh yeah, this other place wants it, and told them the name specifically because they had just been in a lawsuit, and they're like, oh no, we want it. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I had them going, it's sneaky and maybe not nice, but I mean, we have fiduciary duty.
Well, okay, so let's talk a little bit about this, because what you had just described doing to me sounds absolutely just a random Tuesday in Hollywood. If you did the exact same thing in publishing, people would get mad.
Yes, I received an offer on a project and some editors wanted meetings. Some didn't mention it. So I said, oh, they're passing. They're going with this other publisher. They had a meeting. Editor was like, I didn't get a meeting. I was like, I didn't realize you wanted one there. That's not fair. I didn't get a meeting. And I was like, oh. So now I know when one person wants a meeting, you offer a meeting to everyone.
Well, it's interesting because there's such a web of etiquette in book publishing that takes years and years to learn. Some of it you learn the hard way. Everybody, I think, has at least one learn it the hard way lesson. I think it's one of those things where eventually you will upset somebody, even if it's just that they wanted something and they didn't get to buy it before someone else did. And because they didn't get to, they wish you handled it differently.
I mean, I think the writers out there must be listening to this and being like, how do you get into this space? How do you get into a space where you are fought over, or where you have someone in Hollywood that's working for you and helping you with the process prior to? Like, how do you get there? Like, what is the secret sauce to that?
Write a good book.
People write good books all the time, though. Like, what is the secret sauce?
A marketable book that's on screen, thematic. I've had books where producers have said, I would have, optioned this book just based on the name because it was a cool name.
Wow.
People can buy pitches in Hollywood, and it's the pretend etiquette. They all have the etiquette, respect, all that jazz, but it goes out the window as soon as they want something. I've had a lot of producers go around my back to talk to the clients. And
Ooh.
I'm just like, I know you did it. And it's just like, sorry, that's business.
What were they trying to tell the client?
It's usually they come and ask, say the rights are available. And I say, okay, send us an offer. They're like, okay, cool. And then they're like, oh yeah, that person reached out to me and said we should talk and get something together. So they
And
try to get like clients signed up and agreeing to stuff without talking to an agent
oh,
like that.
imagine if a publisher did that. Like, I know you have an agent, but you should really sign my version of the contract.
Publishers have done that, I
It's pretty
think.
rare.
It's rare, but I know some edit. It happens a lot in the art department, it seems, for illustrators.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Dun, dun.
interesting. So, Julie, starting from the beginning, you had this project. How did you get your film team involved?
I was at Grip Street at the Muse in Marketplace. I was down there and I did like a 10-minute meeting, just like we do at the Manuscript Academy. And, I met a literary manager and she was interested in another book I had. And, with that book, I got I could sell this. I could have sold this 3 years ago. I'm really good at that. Like, wow, this would have been easy to sell 3 years ago. The market's changed. And then like even this new book, oh, I could have sold this 3 years ago. I'm like continually 3 years behind everyone else, which is funny. But it turned out to be this amazing back and forth about story. When you have someone in this publishing world that emails you on Friday night and is like, I've been thinking of that chapter you wrote, or, hey, when are you done? Or, and like Lane, not that like we don't have that relationship, right? Where you're bugging me on a Friday night. It's a totally weird thing. I can't imagine us doing that, right? But this particular person, it would always be like 9:30, like, hey, are you done? What's going on? I'm thinking of this. Can we try to sell that? And so it's ended up being this like ongoing relationship for years and years. And I find that I think that's like a portion of that is I think what we do here, right? Like having someone just check in or having someone that knows your work and it's like, yeah, this is good. Or yeah, there's something here. Or, like I see it this way, or don't be afraid of that, or whatever it is, it's so important, and so that person has been in my life since.
Marilyn Atlas, right?
Yeah. It's Marilyn Atlas. Marilyn, our Atlas management. And she's just kind of old guard Hollywood person. She doesn't take a no. Let's put it that way. And she's just been a huge advocate. It's been great.
So Marilyn worked with Elizabeth Lopez, who also works with you. How does the whole team work together?
So yeah, so just going back to, the migrant workers, which is obviously a sensitive subject. I know it's sensitive. Marilyn won the Cannes Film Fest for How Real Women Got Their Curves with American Friera. A huge advocate for the first all Hispanic cast, but just a huge advocate for all stories, and always felt so strongly that it's important to know that migration stories aren't always just borders, that a place like Maine that can have, the ruralest of places, that we have these issues and we talk about them and they're real. And that's what made her most interested about the story. So, I definitely kind of got a little stuck between what Hollywood wanted and what publishing wanted. I think that can happen. And, I'm very clear that I'm not the expert. But that being said, with Rico being, a migrant worker, a blueberry raker, and that's what they're called in Maine, if you rake blueberries. And we had a little thing about that, didn't we, Lane? You're like, I don't like the word raker. And I was like, everyone in Maine is a blueberry raker.
I remember that. I was like, oh, well, if we don't call them that, and you're like, that's what it is. And I was like,
that's what it is. Like, that's everyone in Maine that picks blueberries or blueberry rakers. It's not insults. Like, it's this really cool rake that you can scoop and pluck the blueberries from the low bush. And so yeah, like that ended up being, so like I definitely got stuck between those issues, right? Where after American Dirt, they're like, I don't know, if, and once again, I have their French Canadian background. So it is from a French Canadian point of view, but also had the support of Marilyn and Elizabeth and a lawyer here in Portland that does immigration law.
So let's talk about that for a second. It is interesting because nobody wants to tell a story irresponsibly. You have done all the research that you can. You have people on the project with you who have the lived experience. And yet I can see how publishers would say, well, I can see that going badly, so I'm not going to take the risk. Do either of you have any tips for those out there who want to have characters who are not their lived experience?
I have advice as an agent.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
But yet you are my agent.
I usually say in your, well, you did it well, and Elizabeth was with you.
Mhm.
So, I mean, and I know film is a lot easier to do in some sense because while, some old white man may have written the script, who's behind the scenes punching up the script may be someone who has that lived experience, and who you're going to see on screen will have that lived experience, and they'll add in their flavor. Publishing, like Jessica said, is much different. Even though I felt comfortable, like we had sensitivity readers, publishers at that very point in time were very apprehensive. Well, now they're like, hey, man, we're back to being able to be a free-for-all and just doing whatever.
Right. Well, I mean, the thing is, like, I think the world's better with diverse characters. Going back to when I taught at the college, like my classroom is way more interesting when I have kids from all over. Like it's my favorite. I love, love, love my first generation kids. I love my kids. We have a ton of kids from parts of Africa. It's such a pleasure to have known them and to have worked with them. But yeah, I think I would say my new project, I'm not taking as many liberties after this kind of experience, knowing that it's sensitive. I think it's important for kids to read stories, teens, to read stories that poke at situations that other kids are going through. I think at the core of this book, and I'm not going to give away the end, but there is a situation where I want kids to talk about all that went into that pivotal scene and process the difference between all the points of view. It's really important.
I want to change my answer.
Okay.
Because I think there's a difference in writing outside your lane well and writing outside your lane as in taking someone else's story. So I like books where there are characters where, for example, they are biracial, but it has nothing to do with anything. It's just the presence of it. They're just a person.
Right. I would say I thought a lot about that with this book. And I just wanted to tell a story about a farm, and a story about what could happen on a farm, and a story about what could happen to a girl that's caught between two different boys. And her dad wants her to go with one, and her heart's telling her to go with the other one. And it's kind of Romeo and Juliet, and it kind of has a big mess. But I wanted the kids just to be kids. And I think I did do that in this book. The kids are kids with their own situations and their own stakes. Really try to do that very carefully.
So to recap, you did several things well. You did a ton of research. You brought someone onto your team who has the lived experience, who's there working with you intensely, creatively. And you're giving that person power too. You're not just like, hey, I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars to tell me this is okay. There's not that. There is, let's give you a real voice in shaping this into an authentic, responsible story.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Let's change gears a little bit. So let's talk about contemporary YA as a genre. I heard today this is what everyone is going to be asking for in 3 years, one of those weird predictions that we get. What have you been hearing on that front, Lane? And what is your experience now for contemporary works?
So I mostly do horror, but I do sell some YA. I think people, in some sense, they're trying to age up YA to give adults more what they want. And the issue is it's supposed to be for young adults, not adults. And I think it is an issue and may become a bigger issue. So I hope YA doesn't get, this will sound odd, aged out of itself, because it sounds like they're trying to age up YA and then age it down for 12 to 13-year-olds.
Yeah. And with imprints like Wednesday, it's really interesting how we're all kind of mushing the definition of age group right
Can
now.
I stop you? Like Wednesday,
Yes.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday. What are you talking about? I don't know.
So Wednesday is an imprint at Macmillan that is crossover YA. So it is older YA. It's allowed to have a higher heat level. So let's say somebody is writing contemporary YA. They don't have all of those big, flashy, high concept elements that usually come with the other genres. How do you make contemporary stand out in a pitch letter or a pitch, or when you hop into an elevator with somebody and you're pitching them?
I think premise, the hook, that 30-second line. And I think comp titles are most valuable there because you can pitch something, themes, the atmosphere, just by telling them it's something else. Like Crimson Peak, if I tell you I have a contemporary Crimson Peak, you kind of already know what I'm talking about. And I've said like 2 words, 3 words.
Yeah. When I was teaching, and I think this is for anything, like I think that it's really easy to write something that's been done before. Something like The Craft, right? So everyone wants
Would
to write
love
The
to
Craft.
see another.
Right. But if you write it too close to The Craft, it's just like The Craft. So when you're in the brainstorming process, where can you stretch? Like, I think the original pitch for The Space Between You and Me was Romeo and Juliet in the Blueberry Fields of Maine. You know, like
Nice.
you can see it, right? It's 2 different worlds. They come together. I mean, like we don't have the end of Romeo and Juliet, but thank goodness. But yeah, but like playing around with like, okay, it's this, but you're going to put it here. Or like, where can you stretch it so that it's just something that you haven't seen before and that makes it hookier? Don't you agree, Lane? It's just something, it's like that. It's that one final piece that makes it different.
The new twist on something
Absolutely.
familiar. That's what they
Mhm.
always say. The new twist on
Yes.
something familiar.
So the question
Yep.
I always have is like, well, what if? Like, you know, well, what if it was this? What if it was that? What if it was this? What if it was that? My students would be like, can you stop that? I'm like, what if?
Can you walk us through what a hook is?
Interesting. I don't think I've ever actually tried to define a hook. It's one of those things. It sounds silly because this is what you say about books you want. I know it when I see it. Like a hook is something to catch your attention. And I usually use comp titles because that's the easiest way to do it. Like if I tell you Romeo and Juliet in Star Wars or Romeo and Juliet in space, you're like, oh, what is that? I'm interested. I want to see more. That's a hook.
Yeah,
think.
so I wonder if, and I'm sure someone has a perfect definition out there somewhere, and we'll Google it after and be like, yes, that is the perfect way to say it. I, at this moment in time, don't know what it is, but I wonder if it is that moment when you can, for a flash, see it. You can see what they're talking about. You can see what the goals of the work are, or you can see, I guess, what the conflict is, what the character is going to have to overcome, and have a feeling of if they're going to do it or not.
I've decided I know exactly what a hook is. An opening statement, which is usually the first sentence in a pitch that attempts to grab the reader's attention so that they want to read on.
We
I
have
just
to know-
Googled it.
I was like, that sounded very professional.
I just Googled it. That's literally what I did. I Googled
I
it.
saw you Googling it.
Yeah.
It's so funny. You could see him typing in his glasses
Yeah.
reflection.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things too, where it's like we all know how it feels, whether or not we can talk our way around it easily. And I think the feeling of a hook, and a hook that really will just hold your attention and drag it in the direction that the author wants, it's hard to find. It's kind of like how it's hard for a book to be high concept sometimes. You know, everyone talks about everything between what is a quiet book, what is a high concept book, what is a book that, you know, Hollywood will look at and say, I can see this as a film. It is cinematic. One person's cinematic and is another person's, I don't know what this is. It's interacting with the reference of images and stories that we already know in our brains, because comps don't work if we haven't read the book or watched the film.
It's like comprehension. It's new to known, right? You take what's new and you put it towards your known part of your brain.
And you could go around just combining comps to give yourself ideas. You know, The Craft could be great juxtaposed with so many different things.
Yeah. I mean, my new project I'm working on, which is really interesting, I had a meeting with a Hollywood screenwriter because I was struggling. I wrote like 150 pages and it wasn't working. And I went back to him and he's like, what if you just add this? And I was like, oh, if I just do that. And then it just opened up everything for that project. I mean, it was basically adding a new point of view with all of this baggage changed everything for the project. It was just languishing when I was writing it. It had thrust, but didn't have enough thrust to play with. So I got stuck in the middle, even though I had planned it out, even though I had written the outline, even though I'd, done all of those things, sometimes it's just having those conversations, right? Just those conversations about, what needs to be. I mean, the journey I think is so incredibly hard because there's so many different facets you need to know to write a single book. So you need to know the genre. You need to know all, like all the different nuances of scene. You need to know all the different nuances of pushing specific wants and needs and obstacles. Like stakes are hard, characterization's hard. It's all hard. It takes a long time, I think, to get your brain with every single part of it. I think for anybody, it's a process. And even if you have an MFA, the rules of publishing are really hard. And if I think about my former book that I didn't publish, which I should pull out of I kind of still like it, but like you would literally have to wait a year and then you'd be with someone for 10 minutes and it might work. Like with Marilyn, it worked, but it might not work, and then you wait another year, you wait another 6 months, so I do think it's gotten easier to get that feedback.
I think that's so interesting that someone can bring in the energy for you of where to go next, add this internal conflict, add this external conflict. Everything is kind of interwoven. So you pull one thread, it moves all the threads around it. And I think that is super cool. For those who are out there hoping that their next move is a book to film deal, that they will sell their book probably first, then get a book to film deal, what are the things Hollywood is looking for and how can the authors optimize for that now?
Proven IP. They want books that are sold, that have sold well, and that are original and a fresh take on something tried and true.
I do think Hollywood's still looking for like a ton of diversity of ideas and stories. So just going back to that diversity, like that was the selling point for that because it's a different space. It's a story that we hear in a different setting. So it could be like a different character. It could be a different setting. It could be a different like mashup, but it's just something that hasn't been seen.
And we generally hear sci-fi is expensive, historical's expensive.
Yep.
Some people are like, absolutely none of that. Some people are saying, no, we hear people are wanting that now. So it's kind of like publishing. You take a bunch of meetings, everyone contradicts everyone else.
Yes. Absolutely.
So, Julie, you mentioned that you have Easter eggs throughout your book. For those hoping to put Easter eggs into the plot, is that something you do at the end or something you do at the beginning or both?
Thank you for asking that. That's like one of my big things I've thought a lot about in writing. In my new book, especially, because it's a little more of a mystery, I am just going to town on those. So like, if you look at the payoff at the end of your book, and I think the payoff at the end of this book, you're going to see a change in Clem. You're going to see a change in Clem's perspective. You're going to see an opening from who she was at the beginning to the end. That's really important to me. And you really want to see the different stages of how she changes as we go through the story. I would put in scenes, there were hints of things to come. So I will figure out what was happening at the end. And then I'll go back and I'll say, okay, how can I make enough of a base here or put enough little clues? So when you get to this kind of pivot, you're like, oh, it was there all along. I just didn't really see it. I kind of want the reader to feel lulled and then pulled on their side, right? Like I want you to feel as a reader that you're living something and not expecting what that twist is. And I'm a real believer in the twist, so that the characters really need to go through something. But to get to a twist that makes sense, you need to have enough base there. And sometimes at scenes, you're like, well, why did they put that scene in? Or why was that scene important? But by the time you get to the twist, you realize why it's important. And I just read a book recently that someone didn't do this. And I was so mad. And I went back, and I got my highlighter, and I was like, I really feel like you need to have enough of that, like, clues that this could happen so it doesn't feel like to the reader it's coming out of left field.
I think I'm saying if there's an element that feels like it was dropped out of the sky, you need to, in retrospect, have had some preparation.
Correct.
You need the Easter eggs. You need all that good stuff. Otherwise, like you said, well, it's like Saw, if the guy, he was dead and they stabbed his body numerous times and chopped his head off, but then he comes back to life at the end, it makes no sense.
Right. And I think that's something you can really do that helps with the middle. When you look at your middle, like a sloppy middle, and you look at it and you really analyze why those scenes are there, that's what I did. Like whether I did it perfectly or not, that's what I tried to do, because I really wanted it to be there all along.
Did you number a page with your chapters and then write a list of this is why each scene is here?
I don't think I did with this book, but I am right with the book I'm writing it right now. I think that I didn't with this other book because I was letting other people do that for me, which is kind of ridiculous. So I think it's the concept of good enough, right? Like, I think when Lane, you had, I don't know, maybe 20 small edits, like the book was in pretty good shape when you got it. And then I didn't really do that many edits even once I got it published. So, I think that like going through that with the Hollywood people, I learned so much about how they think. Now I'm doing it as part of my own process. I'm really psyched it's cozy here in Maine. I think it's a Maine cozy. I mean, I would be psyched if it did better than a Maine cozy, and I think if the movie comes out, hopefully when the movie comes out, there's always stuff with that too. But like, I think that there's an opportunity for people just to see what it's like living in Maine, like this little slice of life in this faraway space. The Blue Barons are beautiful. The kids in this story are beautiful. I love them all in their own little weird ways. I think they're all really unique as characters. So that's kind of a fun study. I'm always a teacher, you guys. I'm always like, wow, what would like a teacher do with this book, But yeah, I think whatever it does, I'm happy. I'm happy it's in the world. I'm happy that, I love me some book to film. So that would thrill me as a screenwriting teacher. I'm excited about my new work. I think the best thing you can do, we've heard it before, is just keep working. Put your head down. Just write something else.
And you've had the unique vantage point of watching a lot of writers grow here at the Manuscript Academy. So in a sense, you almost get an agent-like perspective. You get to see people grow. You get to see people take your edits and run with them. You get to see people succeed. What has that been like for you? And how has it helped your own writing?
Well, it's funny you say that. I have a really weird job where I get to sit between, like in this precipice between the agents and the writers. Right. So half my mind now, I think like an agent. Like I think like you guys all the time. Like now that, we've been doing this 7 years, like I think like an agent, like, what would they think? Like I always said that, like, I think the agents would say this because I know how you're going to think. Right. And then how the writers think. And I wish someone else had been out there being like, oh, if you just fixed your submission package, if you just fixed, this, it would be so much easier. Like, if I go back to like my journey and I realize that my brain's half entrepreneurial, I've built multiple businesses, I've written multiple books, I've like raised kids, like I've done all these things, I've taught all these different things. And, and so it's funny, say I was going through all this when my kids were, little, I don't think I'd be handling it as well. I think it would be a much tougher process to talk about yourself, to have to like be your own media team and do all the things you have to do if I had other things on my plate. So I think you're going to get the deal when you're supposed to get the deal. Like, that's just like keep working, write the book of your heart, and then hopefully it hits the market, right? And if it doesn't, see what happens, have people help you, find mentors, find your people within the industry. Like, I absolutely have to say that like my writers group is so smart, just like incredibly smart, like looking at scenes, breaking down things. But it took me a long time to grow with those people too, right? And so you hear people like, oh, I just wrote a book and published it. But like all the things that you need to be successful in publishing for the long term, I think it's a lot. And I think it's just keep moving.
And Lane, what tips do you have for the writers out there? What do they need to know this year in particular to do well?
Keep writing. Write your heart out. Don't follow trends. Write the book you want to read, but always be writing.
That's nice.
Should we give out some books, though? Let's give out some books.
So, Julie, you know the drill. What is the code word?
I think the code word, since this is coming out once again June 4th, is rhubarb.
Okay.
Like rhubarb.
Rhubarb. And
all right.
So why don't we give out 3?
Okay, so the first 3 people to write to academy@manuscriptwishlist.com with rhubarb in the subject line will get a copy of this book once it comes out June 4th. I am just so pleased for both of you. Congratulations. This is such a cool project, and it's so nice to see you both doing well.
It was fun being on the other side. Awesome.
Awesome.
We are so glad that you joined us. And as always, we appreciate your feedback. Just head on over to the iTunes store and let us know what you think. It not only helps us make this podcast be the best it can be, but it also affects our ratings within the iTunes platform.
We'd love to hear from you. If you're feeling brave and want to submit your page for our First Pages podcast, you can send it to academy@manuscriptwishlist.com with First Pages podcast in the subject line. We'd also just love to hear from you.
And if you'd like to learn more about the Manuscript Academy and everything we have to offer, just jump on over to manuscriptacademy.com.